love the Bears. I have nothing against the Bears, but I don't. Do you watch football?
I definitely watch football. Definitely a Bears fan. I have a problem with the Bears, so you should have been public about having a problem.
No, I love this Caleb guy.
I love Caleb, but Bears have to do better.
Yeah, but I feel like it's the coaching, and he just needs more support. But he has a good future.
So we're gonna have a whole separate podcast
okay, we'll do that
about the future of the Chicago Bears and what we should be doing.
So Abin Kuriakose, tell me a little bit about yourself and who you're married to. So for the for the audience, I guess.
So I'll say this first before I get in trouble. I am married to Melissa Matthew from Philadelphia. We got married in 2019, and we've been happily married since then. And we were both on the first national team. And a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Chicago. My parents came here in the late 1980s. I was here when it was the Mar Thoma Slicha mission.
Oh, yeah.
And when we didn't have a cathedral and everything was just, when everything was in the old parish hall in the old church. And we were kind of a growing and small community. And especially growing up, had no clear understanding about why we were Syro-Malabar. Yeah. I just thought we came here because we were Malayali, right? Had no understanding about what it meant to be Syro-Malabar, what our identity was, or you name it. So born and raised in Chicago, went to DePaul University. My background is in government and public policy and economic development. Okay. So I work for the city of Chicago's economic development organization. That's what I do for work. And I'm a lifelong parishioner of this parish.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I feel like I've seen it all. When this cathedral was not used to be here, it used to be a grass field. Okay. And on the summer, we would play football and baseball.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then the cathedral happened, but now people play basketball. But
you guys were in the other building, right? Like the parish hall we call right now?
Yeah. That used to be the old church. And then where we are right now used to be the grass field where people would host, where everybody used to play games during the summer. But it was just very different back then.
Wait, was it true that building was bought for like $1 or something?
Yeah. So the story goes, and I might not get the history correctly, but this area used to be an older Catholic parish. Yeah. And it was declining in population. And there was an agreement from the Archdiocese of Chicago to give it to the community. And for some reason at that particular time, there was a protocol that couldn't just be like given for free. So the agreement was based on $1.
I remember that.
Yeah. So thank you to the Archdiocese of Chicago.
Yeah.
But that speaks to sort of the role of the Latin Church and the American Church, right? Like they've done so much to open up their doors. Right. A lot of our churches come from older Catholic and former Catholic parishes. And so the Archdiocese was always extremely supportive of the Syro-Malabar community. And that's where we got this community. And then after that, then you saw like the extension of Afonso Hall and Chávor Hall. And then eventually this becoming the cathedral.
Building, I remember being here my first year because I got ordained in 2020 and then I was assigned to the cathedral. Yeah. And so there's this huge
So were you the first priest that was ordained in the cathedral?
I was the first.
Wow. Congratulations on making history.
Yeah. And so Father Kevin was here before me.
Yeah.
But after I got ordained, I got assigned here. Right. And then he gave me this whole stack of keys. And I couldn't remember which one was the parish hall. And he's like, hey, just remember, this key has the thing called it's like price value or something. And so the true price value of that building is $1. So just remember, this is the key for that.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I just remember.
That's good that history continues.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you were the first priest to be ordained in the cathedral.
Yeah. That's
incredible. That was right after COVID.
Yeah. I think everyone was crying in the church. Those 25 people that we could have in the church.
That's true.
Except for me. I looked down, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. But I'm also looking at a camera, so it was like my first day.
No, there's this iconic photo of you with your vestments for the first time, but you had a mask.
Oh yeah.
But everybody knew it was
yeah. And then they wrote like Father Melvin, COVID priest, or something like that, a Corona priest or something.
Oh my gosh, long time.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned earlier in your introduction, there's just like you came here because you felt like it was like more of this Malayalam church or something. How did you make that shift, and what drew you into the Syro-Malabar faith, I guess, and the traditions?
That's a great question. I mean, to answer it truthfully, I think one, I have to give a lot of credit to my parents who had a commitment to the church. So it didn't matter. We lived in Northside Chicago. It didn't matter if it was 45 minutes. We were going to wake up early and travel every Sunday, 45 minutes to come to this cathedral for every event you could possibly think of. So for my parents, there was this strong intentionality, and they made a conscious decision of saying that our family life is going to be united with our faith life. Okay. And so and my dad said it perfectly. He's like, if you don't have church in your life, what do you have in your life? Right. So that's where they prioritized. That's where their priorities were in raising a family. It was doing it here in the church. Okay. I think the second thing is, to answer your question truthfully, what really attracted me to understanding what Syro-Malabar was the incense.
Oh, right.
I was like any young person that attended Malayalam Kurbana, I was bored out of my mind.
Okay.
Didn't understand anything. I only counted down the prayers to make sure to understand, we're 15 minutes away from the end.
Okay.
We're 20 minutes away from the end. Achin did this, we're 30 minutes in the end. My math totally got screwed up when Achin would finish Kurbana and say, okay, now we're doing novena.
Okay.
It was the worst thing that happened. The worst thing that happened for a young person. So then I would see my friends, my older friends who would were altar serving, and they were swinging these incense.
Yeah.
And I was, in my head, I was just like, listen, if you give me something I can light on fire and I can swing around this church during the Kurbana, where I don't have to be, I will be an altar server. But for some reason, they didn't let me be an altar server until the 8th.
Oh, no.
So it was, and then finally I got the chance to do it. Yeah. And then the reason why I bring that story up is finally someone told me the symbolism of the incense.
Oh, yeah.
And incense have an incredibly important role in the early church. Old Testament, New Testament, incense are really special in the Eastern Christian tradition, and the significance and symbolism it is in the Holy Kurbana. Yeah. And so it took me a long time where I'm just like, I'm swinging this thing because I want to throw smoke at everyone.
It feels good to swing. When I learned it,
And then seeing how kind of the beauty of that symbolism of our prayers rising into heaven and the sweetness of our prayers. Yes. The third thing that comes to mind when you ask me this question is sort of what I'll never forget from March 2001. So I was 11. My mom picked me up from school, had a big smile on her face. And it was me and my younger sister, Jamie. Mm-hmm. And my mom picked me up and she said, how was school today? I'm like, school was great. It's fine. Yeah. It was boring. My mom's like, that's great. Jacob Achin became bishop today. Yeah. And my first thought in my head was, oh, great, he got promoted.
Like, what year is this?
I'm 11, it's 2001.
Okay, 2001. Yeah. Okay.
And I just assumed that he did great at his job and he got promoted. I had no understanding what it meant to be priest to bishop and why you were selected by the Pope and things like that. So then my mom was really excited, and then we go home and my dad's like, okay, get ready, we're going to church. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's Tuesday, why are we going to church? Mm-hmm. And we come here and we go to the old rectory room, and everyone is giving Jacob Achin a huge hug. Yeah. And I still don't understand what's going on. And then my dad's like, it tells me and Jamie, okay, now give him a hug and say congrats. So we go give Jacob Achin a big hug and say congrats. He's like, thank you. Still have no idea what's going on. And there was one uncle, I'll never forget this. There was one uncle who was so excited and so happy about what the big news that happened that day that he picked up Jacob Achin and lifted him up and put him down. Nice. So I saw so many emotions. I saw Jacob Achin who was happy, a Jacob Achin who was extremely scared. Oh, okay. Once the uncle lifted him up, and then relief when he finally got back on the ground. And then my dad said the worst thing he could say to a kid on Tuesday in the evening. He's like, "We're going to go to Kurbana." Okay. And it was like I was like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, what do you mean? It's Tuesday. It's not Sunday. Why are we going to Kurbana? And Jacob Achin, who was the main celebrant with all the other Achins there, and again, it was like so much happiness and joy. And it's sort of Syro-Malabar life in a nutshell for those who grow up in the States. Like, you don't really understand it. There are big things that are happening in life, and then significant things that really impacted our life that we had no understanding. I had no idea that we made history as the first apostolic outside of India. I had no idea that Jacob Achin was going to become the first ever Syro-Malabar bishop outside of India. Exactly. Then we go to convention. Mm-hmm. So I think about these experiences because it's sort of this really interesting journey when you're growing up Syro-Malabar where you don't have any understanding, and then there's these big things that are happening in your life, and the church is growing in really phenomenal ways, and then you finally, when you get older, understand oh wow, that was a big deal. I think for all of us, I feel like that third thing you mentioned about Bishop Jacob being the first Syro-Malabar bishop of our diocese, and that hug that you gave but you didn't know what you were hugging. So I think all of us, including myself, even if I went to Syro-Malabar Church, I only went to Malayalam. We didn't have English back then. Right. All of us, in one sense, young people, at least who are active now, or the second generation, or young people now, we gave this huge hug, but we didn't know what we were hugging. But when we discovered what we were hugging, it was it became so beautiful and alive. Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I joined the seminary, I have to admit, maybe it might sound weird and funny to you, but I always thought Abin Kuriakose was the face of Syro-Malabar, and so you would come visit us occasionally. I do remember visiting. Yeah. You came for a Mother Mary feast In Baltimore?
Yeah, no. In Chicago, when we were at St. Joe's.
Yeah, St. Joe's, yeah.
St. Joseph's College Seminary.
Sure.
So it was my first year. Yeah. And Father Kevin was there, Father Reggie was there. And I remember just getting welcomed and just loved by you, you know? I'm just like, I'm trying to like still in that hugging process, you know? But like you like dropped like this like this veil,
yeah,
you know,
sure,
more because you started talking about the Mother Mary feast on that particular day. I don't remember. I think it was like Guadalupe or something. But you started going to the Eastern theology and this and that. Like this guy would be a great priest, but he's not in seminary. But he's super fire on the Syro-Malabar Church, you know. So I love that analogy that you made. That. You know, so
thank you. No, praise God and thank you for sharing that. Yeah, obviously, and then something we should share with you is like. Most people don't understand that being a priest is not a 9-to-5 Monday through Friday job. Yeah. You work 24/7. Yeah. And obviously your job is so deeply personal. A lot of people looking for your spiritual counsel and for your blessing and for your grace and for prayer for. Yeah. So thank you for saying yes to our eparchy because that's really important. Yeah. Maybe I was really enthusiastic because you said yes. Okay. And you were at the seminary. And so that's why I was really happy to see you.
And you can just mention like one thing that you just remember, like a good memory in the Syro-Malabar Church when you were growing up that really stood out and then impacted you?
Yeah, one of the favorite stories I love to share is obviously the Bishop Jacob story. Yeah. But something that will always be memorable, something I will never forget was my first DYLG, Diocesan Youth Leaders Gathering. Okay. And so what was so interesting about that was I was just beginning college. I think it was 18 or 19. And we were in a room and nobody knew what was happening. But I just remember I was with all of my peers from all the other parishes and missions from churches that I didn't even know existed. Okay. And at the end of that experience, I was like, oh wow, we're family. Yeah. Like this is my family that I never knew. And so you had this moment where you're like, you found people that had the same conviction of like, they want to do something and contribute to the church. You had people who were just as confused as you, just as had many questions, but wanted to figure out how to do this better. Yeah. And then you found out that you had a support system of all these peers from all these churches, from all these different perspectives who had different experiences and expertise to kind of educate you. Okay. So you were learning from your peers, you were praying with your peers, and you were doing that with a bishop and Hutchins and everybody else who's still trying to kind of figure this out. Yeah. And the first Diocesan Youth Leaders Gathering happened before the formal launch of DYA. Oh, okay. So everybody came together and we had this training and the question was, what was next? Nice. And so I'll never forget it because it was such a personal experience. Yeah. It was obviously incredibly enriching for my faith life and just being a member of this eparchy. Yeah. And it was kind of the beginning of something that was really beautiful for the diocese, right? You brought together, it was like this weird fact that like no one knew we all existed and you put everybody in a room together. We're like, oh wow, we exist. Yeah. And then it gives you the conviction of like, this is we need to be called to serve the church in a different way, in a bigger way as leaders. And that was where like no one ever said that, but everyone felt it. Okay. That's what was beautiful, right? So this idea that, God brought us together and he really kind of poured upon us. Yeah, because I received the fruits of that too. Yeah. Right? I came to here for DYLG. I was here attending all those leadership classes, and I was inspired by all of you guys leaders stepping up and kind of sharing that conviction, and that strengthened me, Totally. And I think, before we like hit DYLG, what that is, and people might be wondering, but like how, the face of like DYA, especially the National Team One, right. There's so many pioneers, Can you like explain a little about how DYA started and just a little history about DYA and stuff? Absolutely. I think what was really kind of fascinating, something that people need to recognize is that when Bishop Jacob became bishop, he was given no playbook. Yeah. There was no manual. He never received a sit down being like, this is how you build an eparchy, right? No, it's just, he was trying to figure it out himself. And it was especially new for the Syro-Malabar Church doing it outside of India. Mm-hmm. And so there was always this focus. And if you look at the Syro-Malabar Convention where Bishop Jacob was ordained bishop and sort of the establishment of the eparchy officially at the Chicago Convention in 2001, if you read the homilies in the text, the letters in the text, a lot of people talked about youth. And they talked about this idea of, well, what is the role of young people when you think about the Syro-Malabar Church in the United States? And so there was always a push there, but I think Bishop Jacob had some really big responsibilities in the beginning, right? Yeah. So trying to get more priests to serve the parishes and missions. A lot of parishes and missions were ready to buy and build churches. What does that look like? How do you do that? Right. And it was all the homework that you had to get done before you did anything else.
Sure.
So there was always this need. And I give a lot of credit to Soni Thavalakara because he actually volunteered with the first ever youth office in Bishop's first house in Cicero, Illinois. And so he was just doing kind of the basic homework of a national youth directory. And he really led the foundation of like saying like, oh, what does it look like if we're united?
Okay.
And so I think Soni was really kind of the thought leader of like, how do you unite young people across the eparchy to support each other in a way that I think other people didn't think about that. Now, if you think about the beginning of the eparchy, it was so focused on how do you establish communities, missions, parishes, churches. Then eventually what happened was the Syro-Malabar Church, I think, was trying to figure out a more formal system of Syro-Malabar youth movement and this thinking about building youth apostolates. And so finally, Bishop Jacob recruited, as you know, Vinod Achin, and Vinod Achin being sort of the founding director of DYA. And there was this thought process of we didn't want to create something necessarily new, but a great unifier of the youth groups and movements. And that's what the apostolate meant, right? And so that's why there was intentionality on the language of apostolate. And so I give all the credit to a Bishop Jacob of Vinod Achin who said yes. And a movement of people who said, this is maybe the right way of doing it. So let's create an apostolate, not like a brand new thing. And then at that moment in time, I still think we didn't know what we were doing, but we just knew that we had to create some structure. And so this idea of a permanent national team that eventually led to regional teams. The first wave of programming, which was diocesan youth leaders gathering, regional conferences, national conferences, and then eventually there was something that was exclusive for youth coordinators called Margam. That was regional coordinators and national coordinators. Then you saw the beginning of Kurbana on campus. And so what does that all speak of? What does that all speak to? This idea of a pilgrim church. So we put our trust in God, and we prayed and we discerned and we were walking together. And I think that's sort of the core theme of DYA. That this kind of, we all came together with very different personalities and different expectations, but there was an agreement that we should all come together to discern what God wants, and then let the Holy Spirit.
And that helped me to discern the Syro-Malabar diocese. Because like before, I mean, when we were growing up in Baltimore and Maryland, I really didn't know the difference between Syro-Malabar, Latin Rite, all these different rites, And it wasn't until Atlanta Convention when you guys came in the forefront and really helped conduct the youth part of that convention. And I just remember, you guys being on stage, and especially Father Abin when he was a seminarian, and he gave this kind of this talk about Syro-Malabar and his vocation story, and that hit. But I feel like you guys just build a good foundation and a structure for DYA, which is helping me now as a director,
Good.
And so like, I just still go back to the charter that you guys created, step by step. What is the vision for this, And we're still recreating and developing over time as the church is also developing, in its missionary nature and to this new phase,
Absolutely.
But I'm just like so impressed with the work that you guys did,
No, praise God, because I think it was a collective, right? It was beautiful to kind of see the role of Bishop Achin's, older adults who were beyond the DYA generation, but did so much for the individual parishes and missions. They were the elders who were kind of like praying for us and supporting us, uncles and aunties who were always enthusiastic about the role of young people in the church. And they were the ones who were the first people to say yes to DYA. There was a lot of people who put in the work and said yes before us, right? So
Achin, man, he's a man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it was a beautiful way of building ministry in the eparchy, right? It was not. At times we get very businessy, but it was a really kind of healthy way of doing it. You talk about like the Syro-Malabar Church being kind of synodal. I think use that kind of terminology at the end. Well, I think to use that word in a sense, but like living, discerning, and listening church. And so even the word synodos in Greek actually means walking together, journeying together. So like how has the Syro-Malabar Church kind of like, have you seen from your perspective being very involved as that Syro-Malabar Catholic and has developed over the years, like, from our presence in the United States and stuff, and just your experience overall. Yeah, absolutely. I usually say, this isn't your Alma Cheese church anymore.
Okay.
So what are the three things that are happening to the Syro-Malabar Church in the 21st century? One is that we're becoming more synodal. And a lot of people, what does that mean, right? So the Synod of the Syro-Malabar Catholic Bishops only got created in the 1990s, right? It was previously the Syro-Malabar Catholic Bishops Conference. Mm-hmm. And so what's interesting is that structure being empowered by the Pope, Rome, and the Holy See, right? So they gave authority to the Syro-Malabar Church in saying that you are a self-governing church. Your highest authority is within a synod that's led by a major archbishop. Mm. What have we seen by that? One is a Syro-Malabar church that has seen phenomenal growth. Now the majority of eparchies in the Syro-Malabar Church are outside of Kerala. It used to be just Chicago, and you and me both know that really quickly things are changing with the eparchy in Australia, eparchy United Kingdom, one in Canada. Yeah. What's even really more incredible is because of that work of a Syro-Malabar church outside of India, you're now thinking about eparchies in Ireland, Italy, and Germany. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then now all the talks when the Pope did his audience with Major Archbishop Mar Raphael, he gave permission for the Syro-Malabar Church to now pursue an eparchy in the Middle East. Oh, okay. So imagine, the Syro-Malabar eparchy in Doha, Qatar. Mm-hmm. And so a synodal church has kind of unified our bishops in a really incredible way to be more focused on the mission. Right. And we were just talking about this a little bit, but the synod elected one of the most, the synod's election of Mar Raphael as major archbishop is fascinating, right? Yeah. One of the most dynamic bishops in the Syro-Malabar Church. Yeah. And if you look at his life, truly a son of the church, right? Yeah. Went to St. Thomas Seminary, so graduated from one of the biggest Syro-Malabar seminaries, had really important roles in the Thrissur Archdiocese, which is one of the most historic eparchies in the Syro-Malabar Church. Was the first bishop of Shamshabad, which was the largest missionary eparchy. Yes. And when you look at his ministry and his particular style, right, the Holy Spirit led the synod to elect this major archbishop, right? So if you look at the synod and its decisions, it's been really incredible to see what they've done for the liturgical life of the church. Right. When you look at sort of the missionary zeal of the church. And one of the things that's been really incredible in the previous synod meetings was the individual sharings of Syro-Malabar bishops from mission eparchies from North India. Yeah. So they would share, and we were talking about this, there was this one Syro-Malabar eparchy based in North India, less than 5,000 Syro-Malabar Catholics, very small group of religious sisters and priests, but they operate almost all of the social services, hospitals, and other kind of nonprofit agencies that are helping people. Wow. Okay. In that geographic region of North India. I mean, I was blown away when I was reading this report from the bishop about this is the impact of the eparchy. Right. Yeah. A fraction of the size of the US, but they're just doing unbelievable work, right? And Shamshabad is so blessed. Like they got Mar Raphael when he was bishop there. Yeah, absolutely. And then now look at Prince, right? Yes. I'm sorry, Bishop Prince. Yeah. and so you're seeing so Pope Francis, obviously this is a central theme of this papacy. How does the church be more synodality and the role of synodality in the church, and the Syro-Malabar Church has been practicing that. We're seeing some really beautiful fruits. Oh yeah. The second thing that's been interesting is the Syro-Malabar Church that's becoming more global, right? So I think I just saw this on Facebook, but Syro-Malabar Youth Movement France is doing a big event in Christmas, and then they invited Mar George Allen Cherry to give a message in French. Really? Because he studied in his doctorate in Paris. Yes, that's right. I don't think 10 years ago you would ever imagine a Syro-Malabar major archbishop to do a message in French for Syro-Malabar French Catholics. Sure. My favorite stories are the Syro-Malabar communities in Barcelona and Madrid, where the Malayali kids are growing up and they know Malayalam and Spanish. Okay. And so you're seeing just unbelievable the reach. This is happening to most Eastern Catholic churches, right? So Ukrainian, Byzantine, Syro-Malabar, Syro-Malankara. We're not limited to the motherland anymore, right? The new global reality is real. Yeah. So that leads to the third point, which is a Syro-Malabar church that's much more multicultural. Yeah. Being a Syro-Malabar American totally brings a totally different perspective to the church's kind of mindset and life that would be different from other people. And then our unique roles in being multicultural and informing the Syro-Malabar Church of how our mission needs to continue to expand. Wow. And so I think it's not just limited to one way of thinking, right? So, and Pope Francis has talked about this, where it's the church's thinking should not be limited to Rome and Italy. Right, it's truly a global church. Yeah, and then I think Mar Raphael actually opened the doors for this thought, you know, especially what you just said right now. He said in the first interview, I remember it was maybe a week after he was elected, I saw this YouTube clip or some reel saying,
Now, the Syro-Malabar Church is not Malayali.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, boom!
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That's out of pocket right there.
100% it's out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and this is interesting because these three particular trends are also going to be our greatest challenges. Yeah. How does the Syro-Malabar Church become more inclusive and accessible when we think about liturgy?
Yeah.
How does the Syro-Malabar Church that, yes, had deep liturgical conflicts in the past, but now continue to be empowered and transformed by the power of our liturgy? Because there's unity, right? 99% of the eparchies have agreed on this. And in a multicultural Syro-Malabar Church that's going to be open for people that are not Indian, who don't identify with Malayali culture, who don't identify with Kerala. That's going to be the great challenge of the church.
And it's going to be a little controversial, and like I think we have to like, I guess, start talking about it, because like sometimes it's like a wound, you know? It's like our parents' generation who've immigrated here did work so hard to build like a church like this and to put all their investments. But sometimes when they hear that, it rubs them the wrong way, you know? But it's not saying that Malayalam is bad or that culture is bad, you know? But at the same time, like, how are we going to function as, I guess, that multicultural dimension, right? How are we going to function as a Syro-Malabar Church in the American Catholic context?
Yes,
you know?
absolutely right.
And so that's where we, I think, if you have to like head into, you know?
Totally.
But at the same time, we're not saying something is bad or throw it away. No, keep some of that, you know, but we have to also journey together and be open to be able to the other realities. And I feel like, you know, the Syro-Malabar Church in America has such a huge role in attracting through beauty, through liturgy, you know, attracting through the different traditions that we hold, even like family prayer and all those little things, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I feel like even DYA has played a role in actually establishing like English Qurbani in almost every parishes.
100%.
Right? Growing up, I only attended Malayalam, right? But I think when I was like in college, or even by the time I discerned like the priesthood and stuff, there started to become a second Qurbana, which was fully in English.
Absolutely.
You know? But I feel like
culturally 15 years ago, it would have been unacceptable for someone to say that.
Yeah.
Now it's the new normal.
Yeah. And so I heard from some other DY representatives on NT1 that you guys work hard to establish that in our eparchy, English Qurbana, and you guys would travel from parish to parish. Is that true?
We would definitely, one of the things that was a requirement for previous national teams with DYA is that, say that we were hosted in New Jersey or Texas, we would make a request that if we were there that weekend, please have the Qurbana in English. And most people would say yes. Right. And what was really fascinating about that is, one is it's been really beautiful to see young people who are formed by the Holy Qurbana in English, because Dr. Pauly, who's the known liturgical,
from Cordemia.
What's his last name again?
Pauly Maniat.
Maniat. He said something really beautiful at the Second Eparchial Assembly, which was this Qurbana needs you need to let the Qurbana transform you.
Right.
And so it's so interesting when so much of our conversations are about kind of the great debates of liturgical life in the Syro-Malabar Church. But for him, it's like this Qurbana needs to transform you to fulfill your mission and vocation as a baptized Syro-Malabar Catholic.
Yeah.
When's the last time someone said that?
Exactly.
And the second thing that's really impactful has been what I would say the growing or the growing of the Syro-Malabar imaginization and conscious.
Yeah.
When you have young people who come and travel for DYLG from parishes and missions and they attend their first Holy Qurbana, 9 out of 10 times they walk away being like, that was beautiful.
Yes.
I didn't know that's what that meant. I didn't know this is what the prayer was saying.
Right.
They're just, no one gave them a book. They've experienced it. And what's powerful about that is that you're letting the power of the Qurbana where people can have a more deeper encounter with the Lord, right? That's the whole point of the liturgy and what Qurbana really does. Yeah. The third thing that's really interesting for me has been a couple years ago at a previous DYLG. Unfortunately, in that year, there were 2 young people that passed away. Yeah. One because of illness, one because of an accident. And so the Achin at the time, I think Rajiv Achin was at the time, was just there. Yeah. And at the Achin at the time said, hey, we're going to do the Memorial of the Dead prayers for these 2 young people. Yeah. And they did it in English. Yeah. And every Syro-Malabar Catholic will say how beautiful those prayers are. The moment you hear that tune, it kind of tugs your heart, right? Yeah. It's one of the most beautiful prayers in the Syro-Malabar tradition. And they finally heard it in English. And many of the young people who were like, I didn't know what those prayers were saying until I saw it in English. Oh, gosh. And what's the beautiful tension of the Memorial of the Dead prayers in Syro-Malabar Church is you're in deep agony because someone you love died, but you're giving praise to God.
Right.
It's this weird, really, really interesting tension of when you read the prayers. So they did the English, and then you had a lot of young people who said like, they felt like that was the proper way to pray for those who left us. And that was the proper way to honor their legacy by, as Syro-Malabar Catholics, what do? You praise God for their life, and you do it according to our tradition.
Right.
And again, no one did a PowerPoint of like the history of memorial dead prayers or what OPs mean on it.
Exactly.
They experienced it because it was in English.
And not even just like our own people or young people, but like, remember Rajivachin, Father Rajiv Levito, he's the vicar of the East North Carolina parish. And so he said that he did the liturgy at some other occasion where there was, not just, our own people, Syro-Malabar people, but like this person came up to him and said, Father, when you said, peace be with you, I just felt like you were, and you went back, you were roping me and pulling me into the liturgy, And so like, even people who are not really like, have grew up with our Syro-Malabar rite, experienced this rite our liturgy in a very deep way.
Absolutely.
And even the Eucharistic Assembly, right? Eucharistic Congress, in Indianapolis. Oh my goodness. In a stage or an arena full. I was at the Cole Stadium.
Right.
What's it called?
Right.
Mets Stadium?
Lucas Oil Stadium.
Lucas Oil
for
Stadium.
Indianapolis. Yeah.
And then 70,000 Catholics all together experiencing our rite. And how many people came to us and said, that's beautiful.
Yes.
That's what I want to be part of.
Totally.
So I feel like you said, going back to like our church in America is ready to be set out.
Yes.
And this is that missionary aspect, I feel like, of the church. Like church in its very nature is missionary. Yeah. So therefore in the United States, just like Thomas, evangelized and went through the Arabian Sea and all the way to the Malabar coast and evangelized not just Jewish people, but all the local people there in that area. We too are called to evangelize.
Absolutely.
And I feel like this is our next phase that we have to enter into, so amazing people like you and amazing people like all the young people that I've worked with in DYA have this kind of conviction.
Absolutely.
And it's this deep encounter with the Lord that was so transformative that they're ready to take the gospel to the world.
Absolutely.
And so,
And I think about when you look at other Eastern Catholic leaders here in the United States, they talk about sort of the Eastern Catholic flavor of evangelization. Yeah. So what's been really kind of interesting is they talk about how the Melkite bishops the Melkite bishop here in the United States, he has a parish in Florida, and it's in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. Yeah. So the Hispanic Catholics just kind of went to the church because they're like, it's a Catholic church. Yeah. And so what happened was he started offering Melkite Divine Liturgy in Spanish.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And what was really beautiful was they interviewed him about this, and he said, listen, the people in this community, in this neighborhood that we're rooted in, came to church to seek for God. And I have a responsibility as a bishop to make sure that my doors are open for them. Right. And so there was this kind of really beautiful tale of like, he never saw his Melkite Catholic identity, his Eastern Catholic vocation as prohibitive to them. Right. He was like, no, this is what I need to do. Right. The second thing that was really interesting that you hear from other Eastern Catholic leaders is sort of the appeal of what you just shared about liturgy. Yeah. And so people coming here and seeing a whole nother face of Catholicism that they'd never seen before. I'll never forget the story from the Bishop of Bala, Bishop Mar Joseph. Maybe you know his last name better than me, but his name is Bishop Mar Joseph.
Mar Joseph Karlangar.
Yes.
I had to pronounce it a couple of times.
He was invited. He's a noted Eastern Christian theologian, right? That's his entire background. So he was invited to a synod of bishops that was convened by Pope Benedict. And every bishop actually had to do a small presentation in response to that theme. Okay. It was funny because he tells the story that he was at the synod in Rome and he heard all the bishops speak. Yeah. And he had something that was prepared from a very academic point of view, but he went back to his room, threw it out, rewrote it. Oh, wow. And he rewrote it from the Syro-Malabar Eastern Catholic perspective. So he talked about the church fathers and the East Syrian Christian tradition, the Eastern Catholic kind of approach when we think about the Word of God. At that time, it was the Synod on the Word of God. And he was talking about sort of the saints and the forefathers and and some of the forefathers that was rooted in our liturgical tradition and what they talked about this. Because if you look at the Syro-Malabar liturgy, it's deeply biblical, right? So he does this, and he rewrote the entire speech, does the remarks, and then at the end of that session, multiple bishops said, "Thank you for sharing your Eastern perspective.
Oh, wow.
You brought a perspective that we didn't hear." Even the Chaldean bishops came up to him saying, "You said it better than us."
Okay, so.
And so this is what is so beautiful when you have Catholics who come to have exposure to an Eastern Catholic liturgy, because they see a face of Christ they've never seen before.
Exactly.
It's something that's so natural to us. The third thing that's been really interesting has been the kind of intimacy of Eastern Catholic communities. So sometimes we talk about how small we are, but there's some people that come in, they're like, "I love this.
Yes, exactly.
I love how this parish interacts. I love this community and how it interacts. It's just so much more different than what they typically experience." So there was a Eastern Catholic priest who said, sometimes we think our weaknesses might be our best strength.
Right.
This is what people want to see when they think about a faith community that's so kind of intertwined with each other. So that's what's kind of really beautiful that we can think about with Eastern Catholic evangelization in the United States.
So you were at that synod? No.
I was not at the synod. No. So Bishop Mar Joseph from Pala, he shared it in a separate video.
Okay.
And he talked about this, and I loved it because he's as you know, he's an academic. It was funny because he just had this moment where he's like, "I just threw out my speech and I wrote a new one." I was like, "What did you throw out your speech for? What happened?" You know. But it was really beautiful what he shared, which was
why I laughed because I asked this, like, even for the first eparchal assembly, I was asked to give suggestions and names and stuff. And I didn't know that you went to the first eparchal assembly I don't know if it was the first, but one of the first. It was the first, First in Kerala, was it?
Oh, sorry. So I went to the first eparchal assembly for our eparchy, which was under Bishop Jacob. Yeah. Literally, I felt like, I found out that no young people were attending, so I just kind of barged in. Okay. And I got permission to do it. And I'm happy I did. And then I attended the third major archiepiscopal assembly. So we're talking about being a more synodal church, right? What's really beautiful about the Syro-Malabar tradition is the tradition of assemblies at the diocesan level, and there's actually assemblies at the global level. And so there was one that just happened right now with Major Archbishop Mar Raphael. So 300 representatives from every eparchy of the Syro-Malabar Church, from every major congregation, from every institution, all coming together to talk about the future of the church and discerning the future of the church. The funny story from that one was I go for registration. The assembly takes place at Mount St. Thomas in Kakinad. And so when people go to the registration table, it's all the seminarians who are studying and the Kerala seminaries who are staffing it. So person by person, everyone's saying the name of their eparchy. It's like Pala, Shangnesheri, Idiki, Thrissur, and then I walk up, I'm like, Chicago. And everybody in the registration table looked up.
Oh, wow.
Because at that time we were the only eparchy outside of Chicago. Right. And they weren't expecting me. They were expecting this 19-year-old to be the delegate from the Chicago eparchy. So what was funny was all the name tags were organized geographically. So inside Kerala, outside Kerala. And Chicago was the only one outside of India. So you were my name tag was all the way at the other end. So I had to go all the way to the end to get my name tag. Because at that time it was like we were just kind of the outlier. Right. And I remember that was my first memory of for me, it was being at the heart of the Syro-Malabar Church in Mount St. Thomas, Kakinad, in the middle of all the assembly members. And then for the deacons who stood up, I think for them it was like, oh wow, this is a bigger church than we expected, right? It's not just people from Kerala, it's not just people from India. Here's this 19-year-old from Kerala, from Chicago that's here. Right. So I sent a letter to Bishop Jacob, and he didn't respond, and then he finally responded saying, okay, you're going. Okay.
But it's Abin Kuriakose, so I wouldn't be surprised. If you were invited for the synod, I appreciate all the kind words. Even I can't go to the synod.
It's just it was just like one of my second favorite memories was this is what they do for every assembly. So they organize small groups in language. So Hindi, English, and Malayalam. Or no, it's Hindi and Malayalam actually. And at that time, they didn't know what to do with me because I'm Malayali, but I'm not from Kerala. So they assigned me to the Hindi group because I'm from outside of Kerala. And then there was an Achin, and the Achin's like, well, why don't you be the secretary? I'm like, I don't know any Hindi. Why would I be the group secretary? He's like, I will translate for you. So then everyone spoke in Hindi. Achin translated. I wrote the report. I go up on the main stage to give the report for this group, and everyone starts kind of laughing a little bit when I introduce myself because they were like, why did the kid from Chicago become the group secretary for the Hindi-speaking group? It didn't make any sense. But those were the contradictions of the Syro-Malabar Church at the time. It goes back to the point of being a global church. It's like nobody could make sense of it. Now it makes sense. But
I'm curious, what did you say?
What did I say?
Do you remember?
the report?
No, was there any like thing you said in front of people?
No, it was just funny because I introduced myself as Abin Kuriakose from the Eparchy of Chicago, and I'm group 17 or whatever.
Yeah.
And they were just like, everyone's like, that's the Hindi group. So I don't remember what I was saying, but what was fascinating in that experience was like, I spent the majority of my time at that third major Episcopal Assembly, which was like a long time ago, with all the Syro-Malabar North Indians.
Right. Oh, wow.
Because I didn't speak Malayalam.
Okay.
So, and that's where I really learned about kind of like, oh, this is not, it goes back, this is not your Amachis church anymore.
Yeah.
It's like you see everybody from every walk of life, many of them who have no connection to Kerala or no connection to Malayalam, but they still came to the assembly because they were Syro-Malabar Catholics.
Wow.
It was just like, I saw that.
Right.
Yeah.
For the Eparchy assembly that we just had right now, so you probably have this kind of wider vision of what our church actually has gone through. So I'm glad that we have all these conversations. Probably gonna repeat it again, but like from that assembly to the assembly that you just attended, maybe like a month ago, right? Like a month and a half ago. But like, what's like the developments that you see?
Yeah. I think three things. One is that we're obviously more established. Yeah. And so it's kind of really beautiful to see God's blessing of all the parishes and missions. Yeah. And seeing the large communities continue to be more established, the small communities continue growing, because you're hearing really significant updates about like, we're growing our CCD program and we're doing this for our young people, places that you don't even think about. I always think about the Holy Trinity Syro-Malabar Mission in Delaware, right? Like who knew?
Yeah, exactly.
So one is that you see kind of the grace of God about the growth of the church with parishes and missions. The second thing that I think was really interesting is this transition with, I think we underappreciate that. So Bishop Jacob was the mission director for Dallas and Chicago and became the first bishop. Yeah. Bishop Joy was selected to be the second bishop, and he was a senior pastor in this community for 25 years. Wow. Right. So having, and I will count that as one of our own. Yeah. Right. So, what you've seen is the maturity of our eparchy, where you had the mission director who was celebrating maybe Kurbana once a month in New Jersey, now become the second bishop of our eparchy, someone that really comes from this community and understands this reality. And that gives us a lot of grace, right, with him as bishop in his ministry, because he's from here. Right. Which is very different in other eparchies where they selected bishops who may have not been from there. Yes, right? Exactly. So that's for me, there was a moment of like wow, like these two mission directors who had no idea where things were going, because their bishops told them to go to New Jersey and go to Dallas. And then look at them now, right? Like the Holy Father called them to a bigger service to the Syro-Malabar Church. And
then just to interrupt you, because like a fun thing about just talk about Bishop Jacob and Bishop Joy, the connection, even for me, like you said, like who could ever think about a parish in Delaware, right? But who could ever think about a parish in Baltimore? But like he gave me Holy Communion. Bishop Jacob, my parents invited him. There's a whole group of people. Wow. And he gave, back then we didn't have, so he gave me a Holy Communion. Wow. And then now I'm living at the bishop's house. Yeah. He ordained me, right? And now I'm now immersed with the bishop's house, making chai every morning for him and I. I have coffee, but he has chai. But even Bishop Joy, when he was here as a pastor, as a father, I was at my regency. At least for a month was with Bishop Joy. Wow. So I was under his wing. Wow. So it was just like when you said that, those two connections made. How a small world, right?
But the gifts of the eparchy, right? Like I there's this when bishops get appointed, they get this like formal letter from the Pope. Yeah. It's very like Vatican language, right? Oh yeah. I remember in Pope John, so it's in the souvenir for the 2001 convention, but they had a copy of Pope John Paul II's appointment letter of Bishop Jacob. Paraphrasing here, but the language was, here is this flock that needs a shepherd, and I appoint you as a shepherd. Yeah. And so it's something that sometimes what we think about when the eparchy is the administrative structure, but it's something that we should also think about as sort of the kind of beautiful spirituality that comes with being this particular church, being the Syro-Malabar Church in the United States, being led by a shepherd. Right. So it's really beautiful to see how the roles of these priests and these bishops in your life, and that's the whole point of the eparchy, right? It's the people to really embrace the vocation of baptism, to receive the sacraments, be renewed by God's grace and God's sacraments. Yeah. And
then just kind of like clarifying, I think you mentioned that Archiepiscopal Church. Just the structure of that basically means that we have our major archbishop,
Yes.
Which is our head,
Yes.
is more Rafael Teto at this moment,
Yeah.
So sometimes when people hear, they're like, what
Yeah, what is that? Yeah,
we still have our autonomy, but some decisions are made by the Synod, but also in conjunction and working with the Bishop of Rome and the Vatican.
Absolutely right. And what I would say about that is like it's been working extremely well for the Syro-Malabar Church,
exactly.
right? So the moment that we became that structure within Eastern Catholic canon law, the moment that we have a major archbishop, the moment that major archbishop is now the head and father with the Synod, like beautiful things have accomplished in the Syro-Malabar.
And my canonist professor said, like, man, he called me Melvin, I was still in formations. Like, I don't understand. You guys have everything. You guys have bishops, you have eparchies, you have the number of people. We're probably the largest Eastern Rite right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know why you guys aren't patriarch. And I can't wait till the day that we become patriarch. I was just so excited for that day. It's going to be great.
Going back to your question on the assembly, I think the third thing, which was really interesting for me from my observation, this is going to be our greatest challenge, is a generation of leadership. Mm-hmm. So you had a generation of leadership for the Syro-Malabar Church that was, God bless them, was super focused on sort of this first wave of kind of like what I call the real estate boom.
Right.
Buying churches, building churches, fundraising for churches, you name it. So we build physical churches. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big believer of just like, okay, but who's building the church inside the church? Right? The church of the people inside the physical church. Yes. So the one thing that was kind of a wake-up call for me from the assembly was how are we thinking as an eparchy? What is our viewpoint and what is our intentionality on the next generation and a new generation of like lay leadership? Like you had a generation of leadership who had this crazy idea of building a cathedral in Chicago.
Right.
And so now for me, what I'm thinking about is sort of, well, who is training those leaders?
Yeah.
How does the eparchy take a proactive position of thinking about formation?
Yeah.
And then what should those leaders do now? Because you have a DYA and you have a cathedral.
Right.
So there's not those big projects anymore.
Right.
So that's been something that was my biggest takeaway from the assembly is like, how do we reimagine formation for, you already have seminary formation, but how do we think about continued formation for our priests, both younger and older, CCD teachers, parish council members and trustees?
Yep.
And like, that's where I think we need to be thinking about that. Yeah. And should that formation be deeply rooted in the new reality of kind of like getting a little bit deeper on our Eastern Catholic vocation, our role in the Catholic Church in the United States? That's something we haven't talked about a lot.
Exactly.
But we saw a lot of promise at the Eucharisticus Congress in Indianapolis, right? And then sort of our churches are changing with a young adult population that's coming in, that's raising their kids here, who have very different needs compared to an older generation.
Right.
We have to train a whole new generation of leaders who can communicate that, discern that, pray for that, work on that. Because it's not just the bishop. You and me both know it's not just the bishop, it's not just the adjuncts, right? So I'm a big believer of just like for every adjuncts you need a good trustee.
Yeah, exactly.
For every adjuncts, for every celebrant you need a good altar server. Like there's this role of the laity that we have to like really invest and define now in 2024 into 2025 for the eparchy.
Yeah, and that's a keyword, formation, and even for DYA, like reading the statutes and like the charter and stuff, you guys implemented that so well, and I feel like that even that structure, if we use it, because like for new regional team and national team reps who are active, we've implemented formation so that they can kind of have that deep encounter with the Lord and learn more about their church and their identity and etc. But this word formation continues.
Yes.
It's not just for youth or young adults.
Totally.
It's for all the people you mentioned. Bishops, priests, laity, all of it. And
Absolutely.
So all of us as Christians, we're in that kind of continuous, ongoing formation.
Absolutely. Right.
Just to be humble, change our hearts, all that stuff,
And part of it too is also like, at times we have a knee-jerk reaction that we have to get ready for the next convention.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm just like, and after the assembly, my thought was like, I'm not ready for the next convention. I want to figure out like this part of it, right?
Who's
like
in the
who's in the church, right? The church, like building the church of the people.
Yes.
Because we already built all the churches, right? And it's honestly like the big question for the eparchy of Chicago. It's like, we built all these parishes, we have all these missions, now what? Like that's to fine tune it. That's what people are asking. They're like, now what? What do we do? Exactly. And so there is this kind of really, and I'm a big believer of, one of the reasons why DYA is so important for me is because it provided the platform and structure for people to do incredible things in the church.
Right.
So I guess the question I think I'll ask a Bishop Joy or think about with a pastoral council or even at the next assembly, how does this eparchy continue to help Syro-Malabar Catholics fulfill their vocation in really incredible ways?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't know what those ways include, but we should give people an opportunity to think they can do it.
Right. And I feel like the spirit has to continue, the spirit of discernment, right? Discernment, being able to, I always say this to, in my preaching homilies, like discernment is to recognize a call, and yes, recognize the call, but not just stay there, but actually respond to that call.
Yes, absolutely.
And so in responding to really discerning, continuing to discern what this call is for our community, for the Syro-Malabar diocese. Always in almost every year,
absolutely,
and occasionally. So so when you talk about young people, a lot of times in DYA and even a lot of our older generations, where is our young people and someone who is an adult now, married and still active at Cathedral, what makes you actually come back? And I know that you've been involved in several ways and you still have love for the liturgy and still, what still makes you want to come back, and if you have any advice for young people who have been kind of far away or has frustrations with this remote, what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a big
question. A low question. I'm sorry.
There's a story of, there's a Catholic professor from DePaul University. He invited, the Archbishop of Chicago, Francis George, who of happy memory, who passed away a couple of years ago. And so the Archbishop was the guest speaker for the college class. And one of the college students said, "What do you want young people to know about God?"
Okay.
And then Archbishop just said, "God loves you."
Oh, okay.
Next question.
Next question. God loves you.
So, what brings me back? I say this all the time. I think that the encounter that St. Thomas experience still lives in the Holy Qurbana today, right? So there's, in the Syro-Malabar Church, there's this really kind of beautiful culture. Our spirituality and theology is this whole idea about encounter, right? The union of heaven and earth, the role of Christ in the liturgy. So one of the things that's really beautiful for someone that, that is still continuing to grow in his faith in different ways, right? Not a perfect Catholic and doing it like everybody else is trying to figure it out, but how beautiful it's been to experience God's love, God's joy, God's mercy through the sacraments, through the liturgy, and doing that in my parish community, right? Okay. So that's something that's still, I think, really powerful. Yeah. Two is that I think one of the things that's really interesting about now, I think, about the Catholic Church is sort of people always talk about how we're against the culture, or not anti-culture. We are always against the current. Okay. Where we're not cultural. Exactly. And so, and it's funny because people would limit that commentary to the church's positions on controversial issues, right? Okay. So name, marriage, abortion, whatever the case may be. Actually, what's really fascinating now about the Catholic Church is that it's countercultural to a lot of the things that are really becoming problems in society. Right. Loneliness has skyrocketed since COVID. Actually, in the United Kingdom, the government has appointed a director to address loneliness, a public health director, because they've identified it as an epidemic. Wow. In a society that's becoming more individualistic and losing its sense of community. And then people's social lives have radically changed since the height of the pandemic. People are not spending enough time with community and friends. Right?
Yeah. In Houston, I was there for a year, at St. Joseph's Syro-Malabar Church, and in the Archdiocese of Houston, Galveston, there was a priest who was assigned for their mental health only. Yeah. So you call this priest, I think his name is Father Skip. Shout out to him, if he's watching. But he would just call him and he'll give you a house for a key, a discernment house, and you just go chill and just get mental health. Just relax, So sorry, going back to I mean that's what's required in today's day and age, right? So what's so fascinating now about where Catholic parishes are is I feel like we're on track of answering many of the questions that's being really many of the specific challenges that have kind of taken the trends that are happening in society since the height of the pandemic. Right. Okay. And the church is kind of responding to this, right? There's this here you have this community and it's really faith-based and everything that's offering for young people in formation. Yeah.
And I think about that in my own life, like how I grew up was just like fundamentally different than a lot of my peers because I grew up in community.
Right.
And then even the simple things of acknowledging an uncle and auntie and your elders and what you have to do to come together as a community for Christmas and Easter, like those things are, for a lot of people, things they've never experienced before is a privilege, and a lot of people see as gifts. Yeah. And we have these gifts that we take for granted. Yeah. The last question you had was,
what would you tell our young people?
So the one thing I will share with everybody is like, I will never forget, there was a young person who we were in the lobby of the cathedral and I saw him. I was like so happy to see. Yeah. And I was just like, would love to, I just made a comment saying like, I would love to see you here like every Sunday. Yeah. Like I would just like love to spend more time with you. Yeah. And it was so fascinating because he was like, I mean, I just don't think this church is very spiritual. Oh, wow. We were in the lobby and the Adoration Door Chapel was opening every 5 minutes. Okay. So he said this and I'm just like, yeah, but people are going to. Yeah. And then he had this comment on, and then we just kept on talking. He was like, I just don't think there's a focus on the Bible. There's literally the Bible on the altar of a Syro-Malabar church. Yeah. Right. And the literally when you look at the structure of the Holy Quran, there's a liturgy of the word. Liturgy of the word. Yeah. Like, and then so I just remember he was saying all these things and I was just like, oh, I think like there's some blinders. Yeah. Right. So I ask young people to be very serious about maybe some of the blinders you have. Right. Yeah. About Syro-Malabar parish and mission. Not saying that they're perfect. Yeah. Not saying our people are perfect. No. Exactly. And at any community that has human challenges, there's problems. Yeah. But sometimes there's blinders. Yeah. And you totally ignore the obvious because I think maybe no one ever told you. Exactly. And how do you change those blinders? Blinders is actually being present because like, as you mentioned, like those uncles and aunties also need to be able to understand where we come from. Totally. So there's that kind of dialogue and listening and just warmth and hospitality that we also fear from them. But also just the liturgy, right behind us is the cathedral and look at the structure of the Quran. Like you said, there's literally the word, which takes us into this kind of word made flesh, which is the Holy Eucharist, right in front of us, right? And that's like, and going back to like what you said about Polyach and about what makes our liturgy unique. And he mentioned a lot of elements, and he mentioned actually our Urbana is like, it should be transformative. Yes, the transformation of the precious body and blood to the bread and wine happens, but sometimes it did also very important that we also transform our lives. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so in the same way, like I feel like. Yeah, exactly. Those blinders have to be kind of just. I tell people come to Syro-Malabar churches with closed hearts. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. And I think, and it's really. I think what do we do? We tell people like open your hearts. Right. That's like But at times what happens is like they come with a closed heart or they come with a particular wound or a bad experience that you just want to be honest about. Right. So I let people. I will never forget. Kevin Hutchin told me a story. He did a young adult gathering at someone's house, and it was like 60 minutes of this was a generation of older young adults who have like kids who are in high school now, but they were like born and raised in America here in Chicago. Yeah. And it was 60 minutes of them just like venting. Okay. And like, I remember I was catching up with Kevin Hutchin about this story and I was like, what do you do? He's like, I just listened. And he's like, I honestly didn't know what to do. And I said, and I told him, I'm like, but you did something that was super important. You listened. Yeah. You just listen. Exactly. Because they just feel like they're not being listened to. Yeah. And so, to answer your question, I think one, I would say that, and the way that the church has to be more of a listening church, I hope they can also be more they can be more attentive as well. Two is that these doors are always open. Yes. Right. That is a clear position. And we've come across so many people that we've seen that like they're at Syro for a couple of years and then they're not there and then they come back, whatever way the Lord is bringing you back. And I think the third thing, because there's no silver bullet to answer all these particular questions. It's really complicated. I get that. But the third thing I always mention to people is whatever that fundamental thing that attracts you to the faith, keep going. Okay. So if you love the rosary, keep going because it's going to lead you to many other things. If you're called to the liturgical life of the church, keep going because it's going to lead you to all the other things, right? That's what's so beautiful about some of the different sacraments and prayers of this year in the Catholic tradition, because doing that one thing will lead you to the greater kind of deposit of faith. And so, and I've seen that with people. I've seen that. Yeah. And then like kind of reiterating your point and it's so true because first of all, what Father Kevin mentioned about listening, and then, I mean, that's very hard to do, nowadays, especially in our culture right now. But like, I realize that with young people as a DY director right now,
like walking with NTNRT and all these youth, young people around doing retreats, really just being able to listen to them, hearing them out, hearing their problems, not necessarily even saying anything, and that's something that our priests and formation always taught us. Just listen, guys.
Yes.
Probably the answer to your question is probably in whatever they're saying.
Right, totally. I'm with you.
Yeah. And so walking with them, I built a relationship with them, and in building a relationship with them, they felt like for the first time, they could receive a community. They were actually growing spiritually.
Yes.
Just simply of the fact that they also had people like-minded like them, along in that same journey, right? So again, same process of being able to be synodal, listening, discerning, and all that, And second, to your point where you mentioned some of our spiritualities that we learn as a young age, is not, what is it? Family prayer and Marian devotion and all these little devotions and spiritualities that we learn here, I think can be kept in our life to, help this kind of, our love for this Syro-Malabar Church to grow and continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to be 100% honest with your question, I think we kind of limit youth ministry and youth engagement to just DYA.
Yeah.
And my whole thing, my call to action, I think for the eparchy would be, it's an all eparchy response.
Right.
So everyone from the bishop to the parish level to the missions level to every apostolate has to collectively think about this as a responsibility of everyone.
Yes, 100%.
It's not just one.
Exactly.
It's super fascinating when you talk to parish council members and trustees who are just like, "Well, bring the youth back," and I'm like,
exactly.
and then I'll be like, "How?" And then they'll be like, "I don't know, but you figure it out."
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
So we already started the conversation in a bad place.
Exactly.
And so to really answer that question, what is the specific roles of different people in the eparchy to really do that? It's obviously incredibly complicated, but I genuinely think if the first thing you have to do is to be hospitable and make sure the doors are open.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just, start with that first step to make the parish accessible and open to the young adult families who want to bring their kids back to CCD.
Yeah.
For the college student who didn't come here during college, but now is a young adult.
Yeah.
How are we welcoming and how do you keep the doors open?
Right.
And then hopefully by the grace of God, everything else will come to place. That oversimplifies it, but I think you just have to start with that first step.
And then also DYA, I think a lot of people mentioned recently, they have a lot of they feel like DYA is not for everyone. It's just for a bunch of leaders or just a bunch of people in formation. So, I was sad to hear that from some priests, from lay people. It just feels like it's just for this group of people or this specific people. But no, we know what's the history of DYA and what DYA offers.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say DYA is open to all the young people who are, in our Syro-Malabar churches who feel like maybe they don't have a place, they don't have a community. You got a home here, whether it's in our local parishes, whether it's in some way or another, but please, do know that our doors are open and we're always available there. We want to do the best as we can to be able to reach out to you. But it also has for us to take that first step and even take out some of those blinders and just try to work, try to take an active step. And I would just, if some of the viewers who are watching, apologize if we just felt like you guys were excluded, or all those things. Anyways, But just to end our conversation, we're come a long way in our discussion right now and our podcast. And this has been a dream for us, this podcast. And we want to give hope for young people. We want to draw them back to the Syro-Malabar Church, give them the gift of our liturgy. So many beautiful things we talked about, but looking to the future, yes, we're evangelical, we're mission. What do you think our next step is to that future and plan we have? It's a big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah, but you kind of mentioned it with all multicultural and, global and synodal, but more maybe.
So I'll answer it this way. What could the Syro-Malabar Church be? Right. Yeah. And I talk about, I remember I was talking to Achin about this, and Achin, we were just having a conversation about the church, and Achin said, one day the major archbishop might be American. Oh. And I was like, and I was like, I froze, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, it was actually really interesting. He's like, look at some of the Eastern Catholic hierarchs. If you look at the Syriac Catholic Church, another Eastern Catholic Church, the current patriarch of the Syriac Catholic Church was the bishop in New Jersey.
Right.
And so born and raised in Syria, but is American.
Right.
And so
actually, even in our history, until the 15th century, we had bishops from the Persian Empire. Right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Mesopotamia.
Yes.
Coming in and being our bishops. So anyways, yeah.
And it's so funny because we think about these positions of authority so associated with like Kerala.
Yeah.
And so when Ushin said it out loud, I was like, I don't understand that. But he was talking about some of the other Eastern Catholic realities. And so this idea that what could the Syro-Malabar Church be in the future? It could be a much more diverse face.
Yeah.
And especially in our leadership.
Yes.
And, my dream is to change the eparchial guidelines about the composition of parish council.
Yeah.
I wish parish councils were 50% under the age of 40 and 50% female.
Yeah. Okay.
Imagine parish councils that were much more inclusive.
Yeah.
And imagine how much that could change a church, right? Because if you can create inclusive leadership. So one, I'll start with the idea of major church being American, which is fascinating to think about. Two is the Holy Qurbana in German, Spanish, and French.
Yes.
Right. So it was easy for us to think about it in English, because of the UK, Australia, Canada, United States.
Yeah.
But imagine big, vibrant Syro-Malabar communities that are celebrating every Sunday Qurbana in Spanish for the communities in Spain, French for the communities in France, and German for the communities in Australia and Germany. That's the new reality.
Wow.
Right. So the kind of Syro-Malabar liturgy that's not just limited to Indian language, but into multiple languages. I mean, that's going to be really beautiful to kind of see one day.
Wow.
Imagine celebrating at the big cathedrals in Europe, the Qurbana in those different languages. And what's interesting about that is also a couple of years ago, Pope Francis gifted the St. Anastasia Basilica to the Syro-Malabar community. Yeah. So it's the Syro-Malabar Basilica now.
Nice, yeah.
And so what was really beautiful about that story was that it was a 4th century basilica that was that belonged to the early Christian community. And now look at this basilica that belongs to one of the largest Eastern Catholic churches in the world that has roots in one of the earliest Christian communities in the world. So you had this like weird homecoming of like Rome and St. Thomas Christians.
Gosh, exactly.
And so what's really beautiful is, even after Mark George, the new cardinal of the Syro-Malabar Church, his first Syro-Malabar Qurbana was at the Syro-Malabar Basilica in Rome at St. Anastasia, right? I mean, it's things you could never imagine 10 years ago, right? So, a Qurbana in French, Spanish, and German represents the next frontier of the church.
Spanish
right?
now. Okay.
And then people talk about the experiences they have with the Holy Qurbana in Hindi and other languages, right? You experience the Qurbana in the beauty of that language, and so that's going to be really incredible.
So we're all going to probably soon have to download our Duolingo app.
Yeah, right. To understand anything, to understand all of it. Right? And then I think the third thing is going to be the rise of a Eastern Catholic formed generation.
Right.
And what I mean by that is what we talk about with our parents knew they were Syro-Malabar Catholics, but I don't think they understood the documents that came out of Vatican II that talked about Eastern Catholics.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Now think about our generation. Like when you think about DYLG, DYA conferences, everybody brings up the Eastern Catholic documents of Vatican II to be like,
exactly.
This is what the church is calling you to do. So what's really kind of beautiful for a new Syro-Malabar generation is they are informed by, I think about this all the time. My entire experience in the Syro-Malabar Church was with the uniform mode.
Okay, yes.
And because that was the particular rule.
Right, 50-50, right?
Yeah. So my entire life was in the uniform mode, which is now the unified liturgy for the Syro-Malabar Church. And there was blessings to that because I was formed in in the synodal form of the liturgy. And what's now going to be even more beautiful, and then I go through a DYLG and DYA, which was very specific about our Eastern Catholic identity and vocation. And now I'm living in a Syro-Malabar church that's becoming more global, more multicultural, but you have definition in our Eastern Catholic identity and vocation. It's kind of, it's what previous generations didn't really have, to be honest.
Yes.
To be honest.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating with our generation. And it's something that I think about with right now what you're hearing from the Syro-Malabar bishops, the Syro-Malabar imaginization. And what I mean by this is Bishop Prince saying this comment when he became the bishop of Shamshabad. He said, you are not migrants, you are missionaries.
Yes.
Right? So like our Eastern Catholic minds are awakening in the Syro-Malabar church because there is unity in liturgy. There's definition in our vocation.
Yes.
We know what our role is within the Catholic Union.
Yeah.
We are led by a head and father and major archbishop that's empowered by a synod. Like all these things are now gifts that are keep on giving for the life of the church.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be really fascinating to see this new generation coming in being like, oh, I know who we are.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's like this Oriental quality that we have as a core, and I feel like when we really tap into that richness,
that's exactly what you want.
It has a sign of fire to it.
And so you've seen this really phenomenal growth of the number of eparchies being created, the growth of the Syro-Malabar spirituality through the multiple languages that the Qurbana is being available in.
Yeah.
And you're going to continue seeing that in new ways, in ways that we haven't thought about before. Like Qurbana in Hindi was available for a very long time, but not Qurbana in Italian and French and German, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's going to be really inspiring, right? You're going to have a generation of like new Syro-Malabar Catholics from like Germany, Ireland, Australia, United States, Barcelona, Spain, who have that conviction.
Okay.
And how they're thinking about the church and building their parishes and missions are going to be fundamentally different from the first generation.
Wow.
It will be.
Oh my goodness.
Right? Because it might be more missionary focused. It might be more of how do we contribute in the life of the church in our specific home country in Spain, United States, whatever the case may be. Things that we're thinking about right now. One of the things that was really interesting from the second assembly was a lot of adults who said, well, you're telling me these things. I don't know any of these things you're talking about.
Okay.
Many of the adult leaders who were just like, well, I'm not familiar with this Eastern Catholic. I'm not familiar with the Vatican II documents about Eastern Catholics and vocation and what the calling is.
Exactly.
So I think that's what's going to be, and you're seeing it already, right? You're seeing all these like Syro-Malabar Catholic creators who are doing really beautiful content about liturgy, about their church. The Syro-Malabar Eparchy in Melbourne has their own podcast series. Like you're seeing all those things.
We have the Qurbana Explained on YouTube.
Qurbana Explained on YouTube. So you're seeing all these kind of beautiful byproducts that happen because people have that conviction and knowledge. Right. I remember a Dutchman back in here in Chicago, back in the 1990s, who said, one of the things that really plagued the Syro-Malabar Church was the lack of an Eastern Catholic consciousness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now you have it. Yeah. Or we're growing in it.
Let's be missionaries, man. Yeah. Let's do this.
It's growing in a totally different way. And that's what's really beautiful to see.
What is your favorite Syriac song or prayer?
It's going to be Bar Mariam.
Bar Mariam?
Yeah.
Nice.
Which when me and Melissa got married in 2019, when we did the bouquet dedication for Mother Mary, we decided Bar Mariam because it's just a
translated to Son of Mary, right?
Yeah, Son of Mary, right? It's sort of this kind of like this Marian spirituality and theology that's being explained in this one beautiful Syriac song. Yeah. But I think the thing that's gonna what you're noticing from a new generation that's having more better access to resources about Syro-Malabar Qurbana Explained, Syro-Malabar History Explained, more people who are talking about it, like even the Polyetchin, who has like a really beautiful way of talking about the Qurbana theology, is the Syro-Malabar consciousness, right? It's growing in really beautiful ways.
Right. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. We gotta be missionaries, and thank you.
Thank you, Ashman.
Man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll see.